Well, our next speaker, well, we necessarily don't have a keynote speaker. This is a very special guest, and we're so honored to have him here. Nothing could have made this day more fitting and special than the appearance of our next speaker, Mr. Bill Hanna, who's the great-grandson of John Muir, and has graciously consented to come and talk about his famous grandfather. Bill is an accomplished speaker on the subject of his grandfather, but many of you may not know that he is also a noted winemaker. The Muir Hanna Vineyard is located in Oak Knoll area of Napa Valley, and the family has been in the wine business since the 1850s and produces some of the finest wines in the state. Bill, I personally can't tell you how much we are looking forward to hearing your thoughts about the John Muir legacy. May I call you to the stage? Join us on stage, and ladies and gentlemen, the great-grandson of John Muir, Mr. Bill Hanna.
Best introduction I've ever had, I think. We had the opportunity this morning to drive 132 up from Modesto and got to see the snow-covered peaks and the clouds that Muir probably saw when he walked up the first time in 1868. Granted, we weren't as slow and we weren't able to see all of the individual flowers, but it is indeed a very beautiful route. There's a little irony in the route and the area in that Muir came in 1868 for the first time. His future in-laws settled in LaGrange in the spring of 1850, and they operated a ferry and a mercantile store and a hotel, and Dr. Strensel was also a physician. After a couple of years of beating people like Fremont and Mexican bandits and American bandits and other notables, they moved down to near Snelling. And Muir spent some time near Snelling in the winter of 1868 and early 1869. So he was actually following in some footsteps of what was to be his future. Some of the stories about Muir that aren't often recounted, Coulterville is very unique. It is the only place that I have found where not once, but twice, John Muir buys a gun. I'm going to read very briefly about the first event. Crossing this greatest of flower gardens in the San Joaquin River at Hills Ferry, we followed the Merced River, which I knew drained Yosemite Valley, and ascended the foothills from Snelling by way of Coulterville. We had several accidents and adventures. At the little mining town of Coulterville, we bought flour and tea and made inquiries about roads and trails and the forest we would have to pass through. The storekeeper, an Italian, took kindly pains to tell the pair of wandering wayfarers, new arrived in California, that the winter had been a very severe one, that in some places the Yosemite Trail was still buried in snow 8 or 10 feet deep, and therefore we would have to wait at least a month before we could possibly get into the Great Valley, for we would surely get lost should we attempt to go on. As to the forests, the trees, he said, were very large, some of the pines 8 or 10 feet in diameter. In reply, I told him that it would be delightful to see snow 10 feet deep and trees 10 feet thick, even if lost, but I never got lost in wild woods. Well, he said, go if you must, but I have warned you, and anyhow you must have a gun, for there are bears in the mountains, but you must not shoot them unless they come for you, and you are very, very close up. So at last, at Mr. Chilwell's anxious suggestion, we bought an old Army musket with a few pounds of quail shot and large buckshot, good, as the merchant assured us, for either birds or bears. As they went on the trail, they ended up at Crane Flat, and someone had built a sugar pine shake cabin. On the way, Mr. Chilwell, who was not used to the very meager fare of unleavened bread and tea, tried to shoot quail and anything else that he thought might be edible. and never was able to get anything, and accused the gun of being worthless. Muir decided that it just needed to be loaded better and sighted in. And so when they got to this shake cabin, they put up a piece of paper on the wall, and Muir told Mr. Chilwell to get out of the way. Well, he disappeared around behind the cabin. Muir took aim at the paper and shot. And immediately Chilwell shouts, "You've shot me, Johnny, you've shot me," and comes out, and he's been shot in the shoulder. And he had stood immediately behind the target, thinking that was the safest place to be. The fact that he had 3 coats and 3 shirts on helped, and Muir says he took the buckshot out of his shoulder with the tip of a penknife. I didn't hear any stories about the second incident of the gun, so we'll leave that one be. The road up to Yosemite on that first trip is really a metaphor for the changing of Muir's life at this point in time. He is gradually assuming the role of complete wanderer and complete absorber of beauty, of wilderness, of the world around him. And the highway can serve for people to leave the trappings of civilization behind and have a more leisurely entrance into wilderness. And I think that's the point of the geotourism, and I think that's one of the things that you all should encourage as the use of the highway. Get people up. Muir decided once that when he had to preserve things and he had to get public support to do it, the best way to do it was to get people to come and see what it was he was trying to protect. That's why E.H. Harriman was a friend, because E.H. Harriman had the Southern Pacific Railroad, and he could get people from the East Coast to come out to California and visit these areas that Muir so desperately loved. So, in closing, I would just like to say we really appreciate as a family the honor of the highway being named after him. I think it's probably one of the most what do I want to say, the most unique highways that could be named John Muir Highway, because it does follow the path of his very first visit to Yosemite. Thank you very much.